Abstract. Corporate America's long-standing emphasis on resilience has inadvertently normalized a survival mode, workplace culture characterized by chronic stress, reactive decision-making, and burnout. This article examines how organizations can shift from demanding resilience to fostering genuine thriving by cultivating employee agency, the capacity to make intentional choices supported by belief in their efficacy. Drawing on conservation of resources theory, self-determination theory, and recent organizational scholarship, we analyze the organizational and individual costs of survival-oriented cultures and present evidence-based interventions across three domains: resource stewardship, cognitive flexibility development, and social connection infrastructure. Case narratives from healthcare, technology, and manufacturing sectors illustrate practical implementation strategies. We argue that thriving workplaces require systemic commitment to reducing demands, expanding resources, empowering choice, and prioritizing relational well-being. Shifts that simultaneously enhance talent retention, performance, and sustainable competitive advantage. Introduction. The resilience narrative has dominated corporate discourse for decades. Leaders celebrate employees who bounce back from restructuring, who maintain productivity through 60-hour weeks, and who demonstrate grit amid chronic uncertainty. Yet this celebration obscures a troubling reality. Organizations have normalized survival as the aspirational state. When resilience becomes the ceiling rather than the floor, workplaces trap employees in perpetual recovery cycles, asking them to absorb successive shocks without addressing the systemic conditions generating those shocks. Recent scholarship and practitioner experience suggest this model is not only unsustainable but strategically counterproductive. The Great Resignation and subsequent quiet quitting phenomena have demonstrated that knowledge workers increasingly reject environments that extract maximum effort while providing minimal support for holistic well-being. Sull et al., 2022. Talent retention has emerged as a critical competitive differentiator, with the cost of replacing skilled employees ranging from 50% to 200% of their annual salary. Baushi and Glynn, 2012. The alternative framework, moving from resilience to thriving, represents more than semantic preference. Thriving, defined as the joint experience of vitality and learning at work, predicts numerous desirable outcomes including performance, health, and retention. Spreitzer et al., 2005. Central to this shift is the concept of agency, employees' capacity to make intentional choices, supported by belief that those decisions matter and produce meaningful impact. This article examines how organizations can systematically foster thriving cultures through agency cultivation. We explore the costs of survival-oriented workplaces, present evidence-based interventions spanning resource management, cognitive empowerment, and social infrastructure, and offer practical guidance for leaders committed to building environments where employees flourish rather than merely endure. The workplace thriving landscape. Defining thriving and agency in organizational contexts. Thriving represents a psychological state combining two dimensions: vitality, feeling energized and alive, and learning, acquiring, and applying knowledge and skills. Spreitzer et al., 2005. Unlike engagement, which focuses on emotional investment in work, or job satisfaction, which emphasizes contentment with current conditions, thriving captures employees' sense of forward momentum and growth. Thriving individuals don't simply perform well today. They develop capacity for future performance while maintaining psychological and physical well-being. Agency, in this framework, extends beyond simple autonomy or choice availability. Drawing from self-determination theory, agency encompasses three interdependent elements. Desai and Ryan, 2000. Autonomy, the experience of volition and psychological freedom in action. Competence, the belief in one's capability to produce desired outcomes. Relatedness, the sense of meaningful connection supporting autonomous choice. When employees possess agency, they make intentional decisions aligned with their values and goals, supported by organizational structures that respect and enable those choices. Conversely, survival mode workplaces systematically undermine agency through excessive demands, inadequate resources, and cultures that prioritize compliance over discretion. State of practice, prevalence, and drivers of survival mode cultures. Contemporary workplaces exhibit concerning indicators of survival oriented functioning. Gallup's 2023 State of the Global Workplace report found that 44% of employees experienced significant stress the previous day, with engagement rates stagnating at 23% globally. Gallup, 2023. The American Psychological Association's 2023 Work in America survey revealed that 77% of workers reported work related stress, with 57% experiencing negative impacts, including emotional exhaustion and decreased motivation. American Psychological Association, 2023. Several organizational dynamics perpetuate survival cultures: resource scarcity and intensification. Following decades of doing more with less imperatives, many organizations operate with chronically depleted resources relative to performance expectations. Hobfall's 2001 Conservation of Resources theory explains that when resource loss exceeds resource gain, individuals enter defensive, survival oriented states characterized by anxiety, exhaustion, and risk aversion. Reactive leadership and crisis normalization. When leadership teams operate in constant firefighting mode, they inadvertently signal that reactivity represents the appropriate organizational stance. This creates cascading effects throughout hierarchies as employees mirror leadership's crisis orientation. Barton et al., 2015. Resilience rhetoric without systemic change. Organizations increasingly invest in resilience training, mindfulness apps, and wellness programs while maintaining the structural conditions generating stress. This approach, sometimes termed cruel optimism, places responsibility for well being on individuals while organizational practices undermine those very efforts. Setterstrom and Spicer, 2015. Technology enabled boundary erosion. The proliferation of digital collaboration tools, accelerated by remote work adoption, has blurred boundaries between work and non work time. Research indicates that always on cultures correlate with depleted cognitive resources and diminished recovery. Dirks and Backer, 2014. These dynamics concentrate particularly in industries facing disruption, competitive pressure, or rapid change, though no sector remains immune. The question becomes not whether these pressures exist, but how organizations respond: by demanding resilience that enables continued extraction, or by building systems that enable genuine thriving. Organizational and individual consequences of survival mode cultures. Organizational performance impacts. While survival mode cultures may generate short term productivity spikes, longitudinal evidence demonstrates substantial performance costs. Organizations characterized by chronic stress and low agency experience multiple detrimental outcomes. Elevated turnover and retention challenges. Sull et al.'s 2022 analysis of 1.4 million Glassdoor reviews identified toxic culture, characterized by disrespect, non-inclusivity, and unethical behavior, as the single strongest predictor of attrition, exceeding compensation by a factor of 10. Survival cultures accelerate turnover, particularly among high performers, who possess greater external opportunities and lower tolerance for sustained dysfunction. Innovation and creativity suppression. Psychological safety research demonstrates that innovation requires risk taking supported by trust that failures won't result in punishment. Edmondson, 2018. Survival oriented environments, characterized by threat vigilance and error avoidance, systematically suppress the experimentation necessary for adaptation and competitive advantage. Diminished discretionary effort. When employees operate in survival mode, they conserve resources by withdrawing discretionary effort, the voluntary contributions beyond minimum role requirements. Research by Spraitzer and Porath, 2012, found that thriving employees demonstrate 16% better performance and 125% less burnout than non-thriving peers, with thriving predicting both in-role performance and organizational citizenship behaviors. Healthcare cost escalation. Workplace stress contributes substantially to healthcare expenditures through both direct stress-related conditions and stress-exacerbated chronic diseases. The American Institute of Stress estimates that workplace stress costs U.S. employers approximately $300 billion annually in absenteeism, turnover, diminished productivity, and medical expenses. American Institute of Stress, 2019. Reputation damage and employer brand degradation. In an era of transparent employer review platforms and social media amplification, toxic workplace cultures become public knowledge rapidly. Organizations struggling with retention often find recruitment increasingly difficult as negative reputation compounds the challenge. Individual well-being and stakeholder impacts. For individuals, prolonged exposure to survival mode environments generates cascading consequences across multiple life domains. Physical health deterioration. Chronic workplace stress activates sustained physiological stress responses, contributing to cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, compromised immune function, and musculoskeletal problems. Schneiderman et al., 2005. Research links job strain, characterized by high demands and low control, to increased risk of coronary heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. Mental health challenges. Survival cultures significantly elevate risk for depression, anxiety disorders, and burnout. Maslach and Laters, 2016. Research on burnout identifies mismatches between person and job in 6 areas: workload, control, reward, community, fairness, and values, with survival cultures typically presenting multiple simultaneous mismatches. Relational strain and work family conflict. When work demands consume employees' physical and psychological resources, spillover into family and social relationships becomes inevitable. Meta-analytic evidence demonstrates bidirectional relationships between work stress and relationship quality, with workplace conditions affecting family functioning and vice versa. Mitchell et al., 2011. Identity erosion and meaning loss. Survival mode functioning requires individuals to suppress aspects of identity and values to maintain employment. Over time, this creates existential distress as employees experience disconnect between their authentic selves and workplace personas. Research on person-organization fit indicates that values misalignment predicts decreased satisfaction, commitment, and retention. Christoph Brown et al., 2005. Intergenerational and community effects. Workplace stress extends beyond individual employees to affect families and communities. Children of chronically stressed workers exhibit higher behavioral problems and poorer academic outcomes. Communities with high concentrations of stressed, time-poor workers experience reduced civic participation and social capital erosion. These consequences demonstrate that survival mode cultures impose substantial costs on multiple stakeholders. The strategic imperative becomes clear. Organizations must evolve beyond resilience rhetoric toward systemic thriving enablement. Evidence-based organizational responses. Resource stewardship, rebalancing demands and supports. The foundation of thriving cultures lies in deliberate resource stewardship, ensuring that organizational resources, time, support, autonomy, information, meet or exceed demands. This approach draws from conservation of resources theory and job demands resources models, which predict that well-being and performance depend on the balance between what work requires and what organizations provide. Backer and Demirauti, 2017. Research demonstrates that resource-rich environments enable thriving through multiple mechanisms. Resources buffer against stress, facilitate goal achievement, and stimulate personal growth. Hobfall et al., 2018. Critically, resources often generate upward spirals. Employees who possess adequate resources engage more fully in work, which builds additional resources through skill development and relationship formation. Effective resource stewardship approaches include realistic workload calibration, conducting regular workload audits to identify capacity demand mismatches, then redistributing work, extending timelines, or adding personnel accordingly. Recovery protection, establishing and enforcing boundaries around non-work time, including email blackout periods, meeting-free days, and mandatory vacation utilization. Resource investment in well-being infrastructure, providing accessible mental health support, flexible work arrangements, sabbatical opportunities, and physical workspace that supports restoration. Autonomy expansion, increasing employee discretion over work methods, scheduling, and priorities within defined accountability frameworks. Information transparency, sharing contextual information that enables informed decision-making and reduces uncertainty-generated stress. Patagonia has institutionalized resource stewardship through policies explicitly prioritizing employee well-being alongside performance. The outdoor apparel company offers on-site childcare, flexible scheduling that accommodates surfing when waves are optimal, and environmental internship programs allowing employees to work with advocacy organizations for up to 2 months at full pay. These policies reflect founder Yvonne Chouinard's philosophy that sustainable business requires sustainable employees. The company maintains industry leading retention rates and consistently ranks among most desirable employers, demonstrating that resource investment generates reciprocal commitment. Cognitive flexibility development, the AIR method, and belief systems. Agency depends not only on external resources, but on internal cognitive resources, particularly the flexibility to recognize limiting beliefs, examine them with curiosity, and intentionally reconstruct more empowering interpretive frameworks. Organizational psychologists increasingly recognize that workplace thriving requires cognitive agility, the capacity to shift perspectives, update mental models, and maintain growth orientation amid challenge. Dweck, 2006. The AIR method, awareness, inquiry, reframing, provides a structured approach to developing this cognitive flexibility. The method draws from cognitive behavioral therapy, metacognitive awareness training, and constructivist epistemology, which emphasizes that individuals actively construct meaning rather than passively receiving objective reality. Awareness, creating psychological distance from immediate experience, enables observation rather than automatic reaction. Mindfulness practices, reflective journaling, and perspective taking exercises build awareness capacity. Inquiry, approaching situations with curiosity rather than defensiveness, shifts orientation from threat response to learning mode. Powerful questions replace limiting narratives with generative exploration. Reframing, consciously selecting alternative interpretations, expands behavioral repertoire and emotional range. Reframing doesn't deny difficulty, but identifies empowering responses within challenging contexts. Research on cognitive reappraisal demonstrates that individuals who effectively reframe stressors experience less anxiety, greater well-being, and better social functioning. Gross and John, 2003. Organizational applications of reframing include growth mindset cultivation, strengths-based development, and narrative coaching. Practical cognitive flexibility interventions include leadership coaching in the AIR framework, training managers to recognize and challenge limiting beliefs in themselves and team members. Reflective practice integration, building structured reflection into workflows through after-action reviews, learning journals, and sense-making conversations. Psychological safety cultivation, creating environments where questioning assumptions and acknowledging uncertainty receive validation rather than punishment. Growth mindset messaging, framing challenges as development opportunities and normalizing learning through failure. Narrative identity work, helping employees articulate professional identities, emphasizing growth, contribution, and values alignment. Microsoft underwent significant cultural transformation under CEO Satya Nadella, shifting from know-it-all to learn-it-all culture. This transition explicitly emphasized growth mindset adoption across the organization. Leaders receive training in cognitive flexibility, learning to reframe failures as data rather than indictments. The company redesigned performance management to emphasize learning goals alongside outcome goals. Employee engagement scores improved substantially following these changes, and the company's market capitalization grew dramatically as innovation accelerated. The transformation demonstrates how cognitive flexibility at organizational scale can generate both cultural and business outcomes. Communication transparency and procedural justice. Agency requires not only cognitive flexibility, but also organizational transparency, providing the information necessary for informed decision making. When employees lack understanding of decision rationale, strategic direction, or performance expectations, they cannot exercise meaningful choice. Conversely, transparent communication paired with fair processes, termed procedural justice, substantially enhances trust, commitment, and well-being. Colquitt et al., 2001. Procedural justice research demonstrates that people care intensely about how decisions are made, often valuing fair processes even more than favorable outcomes. Key procedural justice elements include voice, opportunity for input, consistency, uniform application of procedures, bias suppression, accuracy, correctability, and ethicality. Organizations exhibiting high procedural justice experience lower turnover, reduced litigation, enhanced cooperation, and stronger organizational citizenship. Crepanzano et al., 2007. Transparency and procedural justice practices include decision rationale explanation, sharing the why behind organizational choices, particularly those affecting employee welfare. Participatory decision processes, incorporating employee input in decisions affecting their work through surveys, focus groups, representative committees, or direct deliberation. Advance notice and transition support, providing maximum feasible warning before changes, along with resources supporting adaptation. Accountability mechanisms, establishing clear channels for raising concerns, with protection against retaliation and transparency regarding concern resolution. Strategic narrative consistency, maintaining coherent storylines connecting daily work to organizational mission and values. The Cleveland Clinic redesigned its nurse staffing approach, using participatory processes that dramatically enhanced procedural justice. Rather than administrators unilaterally determining schedules, the health system involved frontline nurses in developing staffing models, balancing patient safety, nurse well-being, and operational efficiency. Nurses participated in workload measurement, shift design, and scheduling software selection. The collaborative approach required greater upfront time investment but generated substantially better outcomes. Nurse satisfaction increased, turnover decreased, and patient safety metrics improved. The initiative demonstrated that procedural justice isn't merely ethical preference but strategic advantage, as inclusive processes produce superior solutions while building commitment. Social connection infrastructure, relational well-being as strategic priority. Perhaps the most robust predictor of human thriving is social connection quality. Longitudinal research, including Harvard's 80-year study of adult development, consistently identifies relationship quality as the strongest predictor of happiness, health, and longevity. More powerful than wealth, fame, or professional achievement. Waldinger and Schulz, 2023. Organizational scholars similarly find that workplace relationships substantially influence job satisfaction, engagement, performance, and retention. Dutton and Radjans, 2007. Yet survival mode cultures systematically undermine social connection. Time scarcity reduces informal interaction opportunities. Competition for scarce resources creates adversarial dynamics. Remote work, while offering flexibility benefits, can attenuate relationship formation absent intentional connection infrastructure. The challenge becomes architecting workplaces that facilitate meaningful relationship development despite these pressures. High-quality connections, interactions characterized by mutual respect, trust, and positive regard, generate multiple benefits. They provide emotional support during stress, offer cognitive resources through diverse perspectives, and create sense of belonging that buffers against isolation. Importantly, helping others produces regenerative, rather than depleting energy, as our social nature finds deep satisfaction in contributing to others' flourishing. Grant, 2013. Social connection infrastructure includes structured relationship building opportunities, creating regular occasions for authentic interaction beyond transactional work discussion, including team retrospectives, peer mentoring, cross-functional collaboration, and community service projects. Physical and virtual spaces supporting connection, designing environments facilitating both planned and spontaneous interaction, with collision spaces encouraging informal encounters. Recognition and celebration rituals, establishing practices that publicly acknowledge contributions, mark milestones, and express appreciation. Psychological safety norms, cultivating team environments where vulnerability, authenticity, and mutual support represent cultural expectations. Allyship and sponsorship programs, formalizing commitments to support colleagues' development and advancement, particularly for underrepresented groups. Pixar Animation Studios deliberately architects social connection through multiple mechanisms. The company's headquarters features a large central atrium where employees from different departments naturally encounter each other. Leadership intentionally locates high-traffic destinations, cafeteria, mailboxes, meeting rooms, around this central space to maximize unplanned interactions. The studio also maintains Pixar University, offering courses where animators, technicians, and administrators learn together, building relationships across silos. Leadership explicitly frames relationship quality as essential to creative collaboration. These investments generate the trust and psychological safety, enabling Pixar's signature innovation, demonstrating that social infrastructure produces strategic returns. Financial and benefit supports, material security, enabling psychological thriving. While psychological and relational interventions are essential, thriving ultimately requires material security. Employees experiencing financial stress or lacking basic benefits operate in survival mode, regardless of workplace culture quality. Maslow's hierarchy, though critiqued for rigidity, captures an important truth. Higher order needs for growth and self actualization become accessible primarily when foundational needs for security are met. Organizations committed to thriving must address compensation adequacy, healthcare access, retirement security, and other material foundations of well being. This represents not merely ethical obligation but strategic necessity, as financial stress substantially impairs cognitive function, decision quality, and work performance. Manny et al., 2013. Financial and benefit support strategies include living wage commitments, ensuring all employees, including contracted workers, earn sufficient income for dignified living in their geographic location. Comprehensive healthcare coverage, providing medical, mental health, dental, and vision benefits with minimal cost sharing barriers to access. Emergency financial assistance, establishing funds or low interest loans, helping employees navigate unexpected financial shocks without predatory borrowing. Student loan repayment and educational support, offering assistance with educational debt and ongoing learning investment. Retirement contribution generosity, providing robust employer matching or contributions supporting long term financial security. Transparent compensation practices, implementing clear, equitable pay structures, reducing uncertainty and perceived unfairness. Costco Wholesale has sustained a high wage, high benefit model despite operating in a historically low wage retail sector. The company pays significantly above industry averages, provides comprehensive health care to part time and full time employees, and maintains generous retirement contributions. This approach generates exceptional retention. Employee turnover runs approximately 6% annually compared to retail industry averages, exceeding 60%. Lower turnover produces substantial cost savings in recruiting and training while building institutional knowledge and customer service quality. Costco's model demonstrates that generous financial supports, rather than representing unsustainable costs, can generate competitive advantage through workforce stability and capability. Building long-term organizational thriving capacity. Psychological contract recalibration, from transaction to mutual investment. The psychological contract, employees' beliefs about mutual obligations between themselves and employers, has evolved dramatically over recent decades. Traditional contracts emphasized loyalty and tenure in exchange for security and development. Contemporary contracts increasingly frame employment as transactional exchange, performance for compensation, with minimal mutual obligation beyond that exchange. Rousseau, 1995. This transactional orientation correlates with survival mode cultures. When organizations signal that employees are fungible resources to be deployed efficiently and discarded when convenient, employees reciprocate with minimal investment beyond contractual minimums. Thriving cultures require psychological contract recalibration toward mutual investment frameworks. In mutual investment contracts, organizations commit to developing employees' capabilities, supporting holistic well being, and providing meaningful work aligned with values. Employees reciprocate with discretionary effort, innovation, and commitment to organizational purpose. Critically, this exchange isn't naive. It acknowledges business realities while establishing higher mutual expectations. Building mutual investment contracts requires developmental commitment, investing in employees' growth even when skills developed might be applicable elsewhere, trusting that development generates reciprocal commitment. Employability support, helping employees build transferable capabilities and professional networks, paradoxically reducing retention anxiety by demonstrating confidence in mutual benefit. Authentic purpose articulation, clearly communicating organizational mission beyond profit maximization, enabling employees to connect work to broader contribution. Long term orientation in decision making, evaluating choices based on sustained value creation rather than quarterly performance, including workforce decisions. Reciprocal loyalty expectations, establishing that mutual investment requires mutual commitment with clear behavioral expectations on both sides. This recalibration doesn't eliminate the possibility of employment termination or employee departure. Rather, it reframes the relationship around shared growth and contribution during the partnership's duration, with dignity and support characterizing transitions when they occur. Distributed leadership structures, agency through participation. Traditional hierarchical structures concentrate decision authority at organizational apex, with lower levels executing directives. This model undermines agency for the vast majority of employees, who experience limited discretion and minimal influence over conditions affecting their work. Thriving cultures require leadership distribution, democratizing influence without sacrificing coordination. Distributed leadership encompasses multiple approaches, including participatory decision making, self managing teams, holacracy and sociocracy models, and employee governance representation. The common thread is expanding who participates in consequential decisions and how power disperses throughout the organization. Research on participatory systems demonstrates mixed results, with effectiveness depending on implementation quality, organizational context, and the specific domains where participation occurs. Well designed distributed leadership enhances innovation, adaptation, and employee motivation while potentially complicating coordination and slowing certain decisions. Lalu, 2014. Key principles for effective distributed leadership include clarity regarding decision domains, explicitly defining which decisions require centralized authority, rare, strategic choices, which benefit from consultation, and which properly belong to frontline discretion. Capability development for distributed authority, providing training in systems thinking, financial literacy, and collaborative decision making so employees can exercise authority effectively. Information democratization, ensuring broad organizational access to strategic, financial, and operational information necessary for informed participation. Accountability paired with authority, establishing that expanded decision rights carry responsibility for outcomes with transparent performance feedback. Patience with learning curves, recognizing that distributed leadership requires practice, with initial inefficiencies representing investment in long term capability. These structures don't emerge spontaneously. They require intentional design, substantial training investment, and leadership willing to relinquish control. Yet, for organizations committed to agency and thriving, distributed leadership represents powerful leverage. Continuous learning systems, growth as cultural foundation. Thriving's second dimension, learning, requires organizational cultures treating growth as continuous expectation rather than occasional event. This extends beyond training programs to encompass learning oriented processes, feedback systems, and norms encouraging experimentation and development. Learning organizations, as conceptualized by Senge, 2006, exhibit five disciplines: systems thinking, personal mastery, mental models examination, shared vision, and team learning. These disciplines create environments where questioning assumptions, acknowledging ignorance, and updating beliefs represent valued behaviors rather than career risks. Practical continuous learning system elements include dedicated learning time, allocating protected time for skill development, exploration, and reflection, such as Google's famous 20% time or dedicated learning days. After action review normalization, establishing structured reflection following projects, examining what worked, what didn't, and what insights emerged. Knowledge sharing platforms and practices, creating accessible systems for documenting and disseminating lessons, best practices, and expertise across the organization. Stretch assignment rotation, regularly providing opportunities to work on projects slightly beyond current capability, building competence through supported challenge. Learning goal emphasis in performance management, evaluating and rewarding learning and growth alongside outcome achievement. Failure intelligent culture, distinguishing productive from unproductive failures, celebrating intelligent risk taking even when results disappoint, and extracting maximum learning from setbacks. Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, has institutionalized radical transparency, and continuous learning through its principles system. Employees record meetings, document decision rationale, and provide direct feedback regardless of hierarchy. The firm maintains an issue log where anyone can raise concerns or problems for collective problem solving. While this extreme transparency doesn't suit every context or preference, it creates powerful learning loops. Employees receive constant feedback, enabling rapid development, and the organization benefits from distributed intelligence rather than relying solely on leadership wisdom. The approach has generated exceptional investment returns alongside distinctive culture. Conclusion: the shift from resilience to thriving represents more than semantic preference. It signals fundamental reorientation in how organizations conceptualize their relationship with employees and what they optimize for. Survival mode cultures, characterized by chronic stress, resource scarcity, and limited agency, generate substantial costs. Elevated turnover, suppressed innovation, diminished performance, and widespread well-being deterioration. These costs affect not only organizational outcomes, but individual lives, families, and communities. The alternative, thriving cultures built on agency, resource stewardship, and social connection, requires intentional, sustained commitment. Leaders must move beyond resilience rhetoric that places adaptation responsibility entirely on individuals, while organizational systems remain unchanged. Instead, thriving demands systemic intervention, rebalancing demands and resources, developing cognitive flexibility, ensuring procedural justice, investing in relationship infrastructure, providing material security, recalibrating psychological contracts, distributing leadership, and embedding continuous learning. These interventions aren't optional luxuries for organizations with surplus resources. Rather, they represent strategic necessities for any organization competing for talent, pursuing innovation, or building sustainable performance. The evidence is clear. Employees who thrive deliver superior outcomes across virtually every meaningful dimension. The question isn't whether organizations can afford to invest in thriving, it's whether they can afford not to. The path forward requires leaders to make concrete commitments beginning immediately. Identify one demand that can be permanently reduced this week. A meeting eliminated, a deadline extended, an expectation reset. Protect one resource today. A lunch break honored, an email boundary enforced, a development conversation prioritized. These small, incremental changes accumulate into cultural transformation when pursued with discipline and consistency. Ultimately, the choice between resilience and thriving reflects deeper questions about organizational purpose and values. Do organizations exist primarily to extract maximum productivity from human capital, requiring resilience to sustain that extraction? Or do they exist to create value through human flourishing, recognizing that sustainable performance emerges from conditions enabling growth, connection, and meaning? The answer shapes not only talent retention, but organizational legacy. Leaders committed to the latter vision, workplaces where people genuinely thrive, will build organizations distinguished not only by performance, but by their contribution to human dignity and potential.